Why didn't things work out between Jonathan Kuminga and the Golden State Warriors? Charlie Walter of the Locked On Warriors show joins today to break down Kuminga's time in Golden State and answer all your burning questions about Jonathan Kuminga. Next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Wolves podcast. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of the daily Locked On Wolves show. Happy Friday, happy weekend. And today on the show, a very special episode. Have Charlie Walter of Locked On Warriors joining me to talk about the Jonathan Kuminga edition. He and I are going to focus. I want to start with what happened. Like, why did Jonathan Kuminga only last 4.5 seasons as a top 10 pick with Golden State? What happened with the falling out between him and Steve Kerr? And then we'll also get to the basketball fit. In Charlie's opinion, what did he do best with Golden State? What do Wolves fans need to look forward to and maybe be potentially concerned about with the fit with Jonathan Kuminga? That's today's show. Without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Charlie Walter of Locked On Warriors. All right, as promised, Charlie Walter from Locked On Warriors joining to talk about Jonathan Kuminga. And there's a couple things I want to cover here, Charlie. I want to talk about, obviously, the on-court stuff, what he does well, what he's going to bring to the Timberwolves and fit the Wolves. But I think the biggest question surrounding Jonathan Kuminga has always kind of been like, what happened in Golden State? I think that question, from the outside looking in for somebody who hasn't closely followed the Warriors along the way, I guess that's where I want to start. So, when we talk about Jonathan Kuminga and being the 7 overall pick and being part of that finals team in his rookie year, and he was supposed to be part of the second timeline with the Warriors early on, I guess, where did things get off a little bit with Kuminga?
Year one, he didn't have too much of an expectation because you had Wiggins, you had Clay, you had all these guys healthy, and you won an NBA championship. So year one was just kind of, getting his feet wet. Moses Moody was playing more in the Western Conference Finals than he was. So he was clearly the raw developmental piece to a certain degree that, hey, we're not going to worry about him this year, but moving forward, it's Poole, it's Wiseman, it's Moody, it's this entire second timeline. So we get to the year 22-23, which was the year the Warriors beat the Kings in the first round. Steph drops 50. And I just remember before that game 7, Steph Curry had this passionate speech that was laid out in an Athletic article, and it mentioned how players were not on board with just kind of what the team was trying to do. And it was very clear that those players were Jonathan Kuminga and Jordan Poole. And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that Kuminga had a really good stretch during that season when Andrew Wiggins was out with the personal issues. Like, Kuminga was really good. And as soon as Wiggins got back, game 1 of the postseason or whichever game it was against the Kings, immediately Kuminga just kind of went into irrelevancy territory. And I think it got to the point where against the Lakers, he barely even played in that series loss, to where, yes, I mean, you could see that being frustrating for him, and as a frustrating, timeline that he had to deal with. And then you look at the next season where he was playing 23, 24 minutes, but everyone thought, hey, it's time to give him 30 minutes. Why is there any point in time where Corey Joseph or Anthony Lamb, pointing to all these different players getting more minutes over this prized possession, this developmental piece that you should be playing 30 plus minutes a night? And then it got to the point where he was actually gifted the keys. Draymond took a back seat. He goes to the bench. This was the year they acquired Jimmy Butler, and he starts playing pretty well in the couple of games. But at the same time, the Warriors are losing these games where he's scoring 30 points, whatever. Then he hurts his ankle. While he hurts his ankle, Jimmy Butler gets traded for, and it was never the same again after that. So it was just kind of like there were never really months of success. There was that 1 month in 22-23 where he took over for Wiggins, and it looked like he was going to be the dude. And then from there, it was just always patchy.
Yeah. So would you say that it was, I guess that it was, he had, when he was given more minutes, he played well initially, but then that blip where he had to play a little bit more and the usage went up. I think you said it was when Wiggins was out, year 2, I think it was, or maybe year 3. Wiggins was out and he played more. He probably was more involved in the offense. And then Wiggins comes back and it was more of he was either not willing or didn't understand the assignment when it came to taking a half step back and being more of that, hey, I'm now the, whatever, the fourth option, and I'm the guy who's going to get out in transition, and I'm a cutter, and I'm a little bit of a lower usage contributor? Was it that kind of, I guess, line of demarcation from like, hey, he's great and he's contributing and he's actually scoring really well and he's a part of the team, to now he needs to be a role player and he's not ready, willing, or able to do that?
It was just always like his role was changing because of the Warriors dynamics, where it was moving. Like you had the Wiggins year, and then you look at like just last year, for example, where at the beginning of the season, Steve Kerr's like, hey, need to hang around the dunker spot. We need him. And so he starts the season doing that. He was pretty good in the role that he was in, just kind of playing off others and letting the game come to him. And then I think he got hurt again and he gets a DNP, and it just always felt like it was weird. But then he's playing as your main option in a game against Sacramento, where it's like, all right, Kuminga, we need you to give me 30. Butler gets hurt. You kind of bring him back and you're like, all right, Kuminga's a main option again. There was just never like this real consistent period where it felt like he was able to have a defined role. Now, behind the scenes, it appears pretty clear what the Warriors wanted him to do for a while. I just don't necessarily know when that started, because it wasn't the role he was playing when Wiggins went down. He was playing well, but again, the team wasn't necessarily playing great at that time, and that was always the hang up. It's just like, yeah, he gave you 30 multiple games against the Wolves in that postseason.
Yeah.
But how many of those games did the Warriors win?
Right. Yeah, and that from the outside looking in, it did kind of feel like things just, the stars never aligned, and it's just weird because it was over the course of 4+ seasons, right? Like it was either he, his role, like early on the first couple of years, he was a fringy rotation guy, as you mentioned, because that team was still loaded. This was obviously Klay Thompson Warriors and all that stuff,
right?
And so. But then when he gets the opportunity, then something goes wrong, and then he takes a half step back, and then he's not comfortable in his role, and then his role changes again. So it's a little bit on, you feel, because I've seen competing views on this, obviously, as I'm sure you've heard, like how much of it is on Steve Kerr and the Warriors for not saying, here is your role, and how much of it is for Kuminga for not finding that role and really sticking with it. Going back to last summer when he was a restricted free agent, that obviously dragged on for the majority of the offseason. Was that just simply like there's no real opportunities for him elsewhere? At that point in the offseason, sign-in trades weren't realistic, and it was more just, we have to retain this asset. We're going to give him this contract and then look to move him. And then obviously you referenced last year, things kind of got weird. And I think it was in December last year where he got a bunch of DNP CDs, and then eventually he was traded in February. But was last offseason just kind of like, we can't just let him walk, and we can't find the right situation. Let's bring him back and see what we can get for him in a trade?
Last offseason was super weird. So I think him and his agent definitely overplayed their hand, where they were thinking that they were going to get more on the open market than they actually did. They didn't get the offer sheets coming in. Teams just weren't necessarily that interested, but the Kings and the Suns were the two that threw around deals. The Kings threw around a deal. It was Devin Carter, Dario Saric, and a first-round pick protected for Kuminga. The Warriors said no to that. There were rumors of Malik Monk being thrown in that deal. The Warriors said no to that. And now you look at it in hindsight, and the fact that Kristaps Porzingis is now on a multi-year deal with the Warriors, and they did the right thing by holding out. Their goal was to kind of clear the runway with him, have him as a starter, playing with Jimmy, Steph, Draymond, and it looked good. Like the team was, I think, 4-1 to start last year, and it just collapsed so quickly. I don't remember the exact game where it collapsed. It felt like it was like around Halloween, where the Warriors lost to a Pacers team that didn't have a shell of life. And from there, it always got goofy. There was a game against OKC where reportedly Kuminga just didn't want to play. They were like, all right, JK, get back there. And he's like, my ankle's hurting a little bit. I don't want to play. And from there, it was DNP after DNP. Then Butler goes down, and Steve Kerr's like, no, we need JK. We're going to bring him back, and he comes into the lineup and plays really well one game where, I don't know if it was against Dallas, but he legit had like 18 points in the fourth quarter. And there was always just this weird pullback between like fans of Jonathan Kuminga specifically that may have liked the Warriors too, but really, really latched on to Jonathan Kuminga. And then the fans of the Warriors that were just kind of looking at the bigger picture that were like, he's not that good. He is expendable. And there's still people within Dub Nation that think that Steve Kerr is awful for the way that he treated them and that this is going to look completely different. It was just weird the fact that he went to Atlanta, played pretty well there in the role that he had, looked like the role that, the Warriors kind of wanted him to play in. He kind of plays off the ball, does his thing, defends hard, and they decide that he's not worth even talking to this offseason. I thought that was kind of strange. I do think, though, for Minnesota, it's a good buy low candidate. I mean, you're not paying anything for this guy. He clearly has some talent. It's just a matter of whether with this roster that he has, someone that likes the ball in his hands, that the reason we believe he didn't work out in Golden State is because he wasn't able to have the ball in his hands. He's now going to a team where I don't think he's going to have the ball in his hands.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get into that a little bit. And I think the concern, at least in my mind, is some of the stuff you mentioned there where there was some like, does he want to play tonight? Some of that stuff, which again, if you're a Kuminga apologist, you can point to like, hey, they jerked him around a little bit with his role and like, can you blame the guy? That whole thing. But like coming to a team that wants to be a title contender and that feels a little dicey. And obviously Steve Kerr had some diplomatic things to say after Kuminga was traded. He said some decently nice stuff about him I thought was fair in the media, which, Steve Kerr is usually, I think, and you would know better than me, but it seems like he's fairly blunt, fairly straightforward in the media. So that to me was a little encouraging that he didn't, not that he was ever going to trash him on the way out because that's not what he does either. But it seemed like it was that at least gave me a little bit of hope seeing some of the comments he had made prior or after his exit. I want to get into the on-court fit. We'll do that here in just a second. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's going to hit a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a homer in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. And best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is a fun way to stay engaged with every day's games. Whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league, every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. The Twins are back in town this weekend, not playing well recently, still technically in the wild card race, and they called up top prospect Walker Jenkins. That would be, if anything else. Kalen Culper hit a home run in his first at bat in the big leagues a couple weeks ago. Why couldn't Walker Jenkins do the same thing? If you're ready to play your game today, join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. All right, so I want to talk just a little bit about the on-court fit, and we talked a little bit about like the various versions of higher usage versus lower usage versions of Kuminga coming to Minnesota. I think let me phrase that a little bit a different way. So in Golden State, and correct me if I'm wrong, but going back and just looking at the numbers from Kuminga's time in Golden State, he was virtually always, after his first year at least, like the second or third option on the team in terms of usage rate. Like he was rivaling Klay Thompson in the first couple of years of his career in terms of his usage rate when he's on the floor. Obviously played a lot less minutes than Klay Thompson, but he was the third highest scorer on the team a couple of years. I think he was the second highest scorer a couple of years ago. Maybe he was third. That might've been Klay Thompson's last year, but he was always kind of like a key. And you even mentioned they gave him the keys to the offense at one point, basically a kind of a pseudo Draymond Green type role as a point forward. And now he's and also the Warriors, by the way, went from a top 10 offense to a bottom half offense the last couple of years while Kuminga was a key member of the rotation and a key member of the offense. And now he's going to come to a Timberwolves team that obviously revolves around Anthony Edwards and also now LaMelo Ball. And you have Jaden McDaniels, who scored a career high 15 points a game last year. I'm sure the Timberwolves pitch to Kuminga was, hey, you can come in and get an easy 12-5 just by running the floor with LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards, and you're not going to be a key focal point of the offense. Maybe they pitched him on, you could run the second team offense. I don't know. But when he was playing more of that cutter, score in transition, maybe a little bit as a screener, sort of a role, he was more or less an effective cog in the Warriors offense in those years. Is that fair to say?
He just didn't do it much. Like there was the one focus early last season, game 1 against the Lakers, the entire preseason. It was like an 8-game sample size where it felt like he had really turned a corner in terms of almost to the point where he was too unselfish. You'd see him get downhill. I remember he did it with Atlanta. He got downhill and had an easy dunk and kicked it to the corner to Nickeil Alexander-Walker to hit a 3. That's the kind of stuff he was doing to start the season with the Warriors. And I don't even remember if it changed, to be honest with you. Specifically, the season got weird last year to where he just kind of fell to the rotation quickly. It was very clear early that he was not a Steve Kerr guy. Not from a personality standpoint. I don't think there were any sorts of like Steve Kerr hated Kuminga as a player on the team. I think it was just a fit thing to where he didn't want to make the pick. It was clearly a Joe Lacob decision at the end of the day. And Steve Kerr just kind of thought that, hey, I think we're better off with this guy, Guy Santos, who ended up, playing really well last year. That's who he was going with in some of these stretch moments to end the 2025 season. And, he went Anthony Lamb at one point. He just kept going to the well of these different guys that weren't Kuminga that showed us very early he was not that type of player. Now, the thing that I think is super interesting is the way that Kuminga kind of was looking at last offseason was like, I'm going to go into Sacramento. I'm going to be a focal point. I'm going to have the ball in my hands and kind of rebuild my career this way. And it's a complete opposite scenario. He's going to Minnesota. He's making really no money. He's got to kind of fit into the role that the Warriors wanted him to fit into. I would think it doesn't make a ton of sense on paper, but it's so crazy. It just may work.
Yeah. And the Wolves obviously the biggest thing is they just didn't have a power forward on the roster besides Trey Lyles, who wasn't in the league last year. And I think will be fine, but he's not going to play more than 18 minutes a game or whatever at the most. They just needed another body in the front court. And clearly Kuminga has much higher upside than anyone else that was still on the market. And I think the crazy thing is if he does exactly what he did when he was going well for Golden State and exactly what the Wolves need out of their fifth starter. I mean, let's face it, like he's their fifth best starter. If you look at the quality of their starting lineup, this is a team without a very deep bench with the DiVincenzo injury. And so like they just, they needed more talent, period. But what they need out of him is the things that it seems like he was sometimes hesitant to do in Golden State. They need him to run and jump and rebound and catch lobs and be a cutter and, play hard and compete defensively. And you're playing between Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert. So like you and Ant can kind of switch off on taking tougher defensive assignments. And I mean, neither of them are very good off the ball. So it could be a little dicey, but like there's enough defensive talent there as well. It's just, those are the things they need him to do. And those are exactly the things that he didn't consistently do in Golden State, which is my big concern. And you said earlier, it's low risk. And that's absolutely true from hey, they just needed a power forward. And they also, this contract is peanuts. It's $6 million a year. But I worry a little bit about, ball stopping, isolation, et cetera. And the Warriors aren't a team that plays a whole lot of isolation in their half court sets. Was there ever any, and I say this, Timberwolves fans are recovering from the Julius Randle experience, which obviously there were good moments, and he played really well against Kuminga and the Warriors in the playoffs a couple of years ago. But pretty much since then, it was kind of downhill with Randle in the Timberwolves uniform. Were there times where Kuminga was like, the Warriors more of a free-flowing offense, and I think probably Kuminga was able to capitalize on the gravity of Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and stuff early in his career. Were there times where it felt like Kuminga was just kind of a ball stopper in the flow of the offense and, hey, I'm going to go ISO, I'm going to go rogue a little bit here, I'm going to get to the mid-range, and the Warriors, that's not how they like to play. Was that ever really a concern in kind of the general flow of the Warriors offense?
For sure. He is, when you get him into transition, he's good. Like there's no gripes with Jonathan Kuminga's games. He's good. He's pretty good passer. He makes good decisions in the open floor. He can fly. He can finish. He's awesome. It's the half court that I think worries a lot of people. It's the boxing out on defense. It's the defensive rotations. It's like the little things. But offensively, yeah, it was just you're running a motion offense where you're looking to get Steph Curry open at all times. And, Curry would be running off ball screens and Kuminga would, kind of size up his defender, put a shoulder into someone and, kind of go rogue from time to time. And sometimes he'd score, he was an efficient scorer. I think he was like close to 50% from the floor. So it's not like he wasn't effective. It's just not the way that the Warriors wanted to play. It's not the way that Steve Kerr wanted the offense to hum. And he kind of got stuck up in the crosshairs. And that's why the Atlanta experience was so strange to me, because it felt like it was going okay. It felt like they would want to retain him at some deal. And for him to go out this offseason and only get $6.5 million after being offered 3 years, $75 million by the Warriors or whatever it ended up being in the 70s, that to me is just, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was reportedly offered I think twice as much, or it was like 12 million a year from the Lakers for 3 years in a sign and trade. And he decided to go to Minnesota, also picking the Wolves over Portland and Chicago, which I mean, makes sense. If you want to win and rebuild your value, definitely makes sense. All right. Any final thoughts, Charlie, before any final Kuminga thoughts that you want to leave Wolves fans with?
I think the experience in Golden State was just it was a bummer. Frankly, I have no idea how good or bad Jonathan Kuminga is because it was just always choppy. He never got handed the keys like he was promised. I don't think he's going to get handed those keys in Minnesota. I think the biggest thing to look out for is, was he humbled through this entire situation to where maybe that voice in his head that is Steve Kerr coaching him, the Hall of Fame coach from years back, maybe he does transition his game. Remember the comparison to Aaron Gordon. That's the one that was always thrown around by Steve Kerr. It took Gordon a little too. He never really had this portion of this game in Orlando. Really took him to get to Denver to where it was kind of unlocked. And you wonder if that's the reason why he's going to Minnesota. He's like, you know what? I understand what Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball and these guys do, and I'm going to try to tailor more of my game like a Jaden McDaniels and be their kind of do-it-all glue guy that crashes the glass, that gets boards, that cuts, and that does things off the ball. But I think there is a lot of instinct that goes into it, and sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't, and I just don't know if he processes the game fast enough to ever be that dude. He's at his best in the open floor, and he's at his best scoring when you kind of just give him the ball and get out of his way and let him do his thing. And I don't think that's the role that he's going to be asked to do in Minnesota. So we'll see, but it is buy low.
Yeah, buy low. I think it raises the Wolves ceiling pretty considerably if he does the things like you said. Best case scenario, I think, is a positive scenario for the Wolves and for Jonathan Kuminga and his future, contracts, future free agent prospects. Appreciate you coming on.
Yes, sir.
All right, there you have it. Charlie Walter from Lockdown Warriors. Great insight from him. I'm going to kind of pull out what I thought was most interesting and put a bow on the Kuminga conversation for the day here in the final segment when we come back. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Lockdown Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Odoo. Running a business should not feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working toward the same goal, and that's true in sports just like it is in business. Look, Jonathan Kuminga needs to be working toward the same goal. They've all got to be pulling on the same side of the rope. And like Charlie and I just talked about, Kuminga's got to play the game. He's got to fill the role the Wolves need him to fill. And as long as that happens, as long as these guys are all on the same page, this could be a really dangerous lineup. And the Wolves are no doubt counting on that. Chris Finch, Anthony Edwards, Tim Connolly, and their recruiting of Jonathan Kuminga made it very clear what they need from him. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockdown. That's Odoo, ODOO.com/lockdown. All right. So conversation with Charlie was, I thought, insightful. I think some of the more in-depth stuff about the actual, think about, so everyone knows that Jonathan Kuminga had a falling out with the Warriors. There was the bad one last season, the year before that, prior to the contract issue last summer. So 2 seasons ago, it was like, hey, I want more minutes. I want to be more involved. And then he got some DNP-CDs. He ends up re-signing last summer and then essentially falls out of the rotation in December with the Warriors. That we all knew about. But I think some of the more in the weeds things that happened in years 2 and 3 that Charlie went through are super fascinating, because if you're not following the Warriors on a daily basis, those are things you wouldn't necessarily know. And so the fact that Andrew Wiggins misses, I think it was year 3 for Kuminga. Andrew Wiggins misses a chunk of time for personal reasons, and Kuminga flourishes, plays really well. That's the year when he averaged 16 points a game. He averaged 5 rebounds a game. He shot 58% on twos. The shot mix was actually pretty good. The 3-point percentage wasn't good. It was 32%. But in general, the shot selection was solid, and he played in transition a lot with Steph Curry that year. That was arguably, it sounds like Kuminga's best stretch of basketball was that year 3, 23-24 season when Andrew Wiggins missed some time. Wiggins comes back. Kuminga fails to do a good job taking a backseat, or even just taking being in a sidecar role next to Steph Curry and Wiggins and the rest, Draymond Green, the rest of these guys. And so then the Warriors try to kind of make him take over a Draymond Green-esque role. And as Charlie said, he is a good passer. He's fast, he's athletic, he's big, he's long, he's good in transition. But that didn't quite work out. And the isolation ball stuff doesn't fly in Golden State. And it's funny because, on the one hand, that's exactly what I'm worried about. And I referenced this in the second segment there with Charlie, is the coming off of the Julius Randle experience, where, yes, the Wolves would call some sets that ran through Julius Randle, that Chris Finch would do that. I don't think he's going to do that very often for Jonathan Kuminga, at least not with Ant and or LaMelo on the floor. If we're ever in a situation where Kuminga is running the second unit without Ant and Melo, first of all, not ideal. Second of all, fine. He can run some stuff at that point, be a point forward. But he's better as a pass out of a cut, right? Or pass on, second side attack and then driving kick. Dump off pass to Rudy. Stuff like that. I don't think the Draymond role is necessarily the right role for Jonathan Kuminga, and I think the Warriors found that out as well. And the role that he was most successful in was that off-ball, again, playing in transition, playing fast, playing off the catch. Teams obviously don't respect the three-point shot from Kuminga, but because he's so explosive, his first step is really good for his size. He can still be effective as a second-side attacker, even if teams are in rotation and not expecting him to shoot a three, or daring him to shoot a three. He can still get his head and shoulders past guys, even if they're closing out, with a bit of a cushion. He's big enough and athletic enough that he can still get to his spots within the half court. And that's when he was most successful in a Warriors uniform. And then after Wiggins came back in that year 3, things started kind of on a downhill trajectory. He missed some time in year 4, the 24-25 season. He actually missed 30. Well, he didn't play in 30 plus games. There were some injury issues. There was also some DNP-CDs, but that 2-year stretch, he averaged almost 16 points a game, 15.8 points per game over those 2 years, shot about 31% from 3. And somewhere in there between 2 years ago and this last season, the shot selection, the shot mix started to shift. And this is something I want to spend a lot more time on Monday's show. I'm going to dig in on the shot selection for Kuminga, because the mid-range shot you see start to increase in terms of frequency within his game, his shot selection. He started shooting a lot more from the mid-range. He started shooting a few more threes, neither really for profit. And I worry a little bit about the time he spent in Atlanta at the end of the year. Yes, he was a big part of that team. He averaged over 16 points a game. He helped lift them out of the play-in discussion, and they actually had a 2-1 lead on the eventual champion New York Knicks in the first round of the playoffs as a 6th seed. But I worry a little bit about how well he shot the ball from the mid-range, because it's a small enough sample that he played in Atlanta, 16 regular season games as essentially a sixth man type, playing 22 minutes a game. It's a small enough sample that I don't know if it's real. And what is real is the increase in frequency from the mid-range over the course of the last 2.5, 3 seasons for Kuminga. And we don't need more of that. Julius Randle was actually really good from 12, 15, 18, not 18, 12, 15, 16 feet. Randle was really good from that area. Sometimes he did it too much. Sometimes he put his head down and just got to that spot. And it just sometimes it was exactly what the Wolves needed. And other times it was the last thing they needed, which is maybe the best way to describe the Julius Randle experience in one sentence, right? They don't need that from Jonathan Kuminga. They need him to be a lob threat, play out of the dunker, be a cutter, attack closeouts, play in transition. All of those things are what they need Jonathan Kuminga to do. They don't need him to play in isolation. And as long as he knows that, and undoubtedly this was part of the recruitment process, knowing it and acknowledging it, if you're Kuminga, is one thing. Actually executing in that way is an entirely different thing. And they're going to need him to agree that that's the best path forward for all parties if they're going to have a successful introduction for Kuminga into the starting lineup. All right, as mentioned on Monday's show, I'm going to dig in a lot more on the shot selection for Kuminga. I'm going to dig in on really like the in-depth pros and cons. I know I touched on it on the Instant Reaction show that posted early in the morning on Thursday, and then a little bit with Charlie today. But I want to really do a full show on what he brings to the table on the pro side and also what some of the concerns are. We'll do that early next week. Also anticipate the Timberwolves to make that next roster move. It's likely going to happen in the next couple of days. There's going to be, whether it's a waiving and stretching Josh Green, if they're able to trade Josh Green, or if they trade TJ Shannon. Those are, I think, the three options like we talked about on yesterday's show. So keep an eye on that. We'll definitely post a short, maybe even an instant reaction show, depending on when it happens this weekend. A quick bonus episode. Otherwise, we'll cover that on Monday's show as well. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder about the Everydayer Club as well. You can sign up for the Everydayer Club at lockedonwolves.supercast.com. You get ad-free episodes of Locked On Wolves, plus access to the Discord chat. We're obviously talking Jonathan Kuminga this week. Again, ad-free episodes and Discord channel access by signing up at lockedonwolves.supercast.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.